Hello there, beautiful soul. You've just made my entire week by clicking on this video, and honestly, hitting that subscribe button would probably make my entire month. But hey, no pressure. Just kidding. Total pressure. Let's get this party started. I've been trying to figure out the best place to begin this story, and I've decided to start with a particular Friday in April. The timeline might zigzag a little, but that day feels like the right entry point. It was just past 5 in the evening. Friday, finally, and I had wrapped up my work for the week. Spring in Oregon can be all over the place, but that day was exceptional. Nearly 70 degrees, sunshine all around, and not a single cloud to ruin it. I felt great. The weekend had arrived, and the weather seemed to be celebrating with me. I started thinking, what should I do this weekend? And just like that, my good mood slipped away. I didn't have any plans, no one to see, no activities lined up. It's been 3 years since the divorce. I'm 28 now, and I'm not seeing anyone. I gave online dating a shot. It got me nowhere and only drained my bank account. Most of my friends are married, and the few blind dates they've set me up on? Awkward disasters. Oddly enough, my ex is now in a stable relationship with a woman, and together, they're probably the female friends I'm closest to. That thought flickered through my head. What exactly is wrong with me? When I pulled into my driveway, I felt a brief lift in my spirits. The house stood there, solid and familiar. I'd gotten it through a connection at work, a sweet deal really, but it was definitely a fixer-upper when I bought it. I'd invested a lot of sweat equity getting it into shape. Built in the 1950s, it had that vintage modern charm. I'd sunk a fair amount of time and money into restoring it, and thanks to some well-placed connections in the lumber industry, I managed to bring it back to life piece by piece. Once inside, I grabbed my running clothes and went to change. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, 6 feet tall, around 190 pounds. Not exactly shredded, but my abs were clearly defined. In my ex's words, I looked pretty damn good. So why then had I not been on a decent date in months? Frustrated, I laced up and went out for a 5-mile run. Exercise always helped clear my head. Afterward, I sat on the back patio, sipping a cold beer under the golden sun, feeling just a little lighter. That's when my phone rang. It was Mike, my former brother-in-law. Hey Cam, how you doing? Mike manages my modest financial life. Good guy. His wife Megan is stunning, full of energy, and does a great job keeping Mike's ego under control. He asked what I had going on the next day. I didn't want to admit that my schedule was wide open, so I pretended to have some things planned but told him I had wiggle room. Don't tell me your old man's got you working on a Saturday, he joked. Some context. I work at a company called Specialty Timbers. The owner is Ted Robinson, my boss, Mike's dad. My ex, Kimberly, is the company's bookkeeper, as well as Ted's daughter and Mike's sister. Mike didn't follow the family business. Instead, he got his MBA and now runs his own investment firm, Robinson and Associates. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly broke, but we hovered near that line. If I wanted anything beyond the essentials, I had to find a way to pay for it myself. After middle school soccer season one year, I visited a career counseling center and saw a job posting for a company just a bike ride from my mom's place. I already knew that if I ever wanted a car, I'd have to earn it on my own. That Tuesday at 4 p.m., I walked into Specialty Timbers for the very first time. The space had a big open office area with glass windows overlooking the warehouse in back and 3 private offices off to the side. I flipped through my notes and asked to speak with Mr. Hanratty. About 10 minutes later, a short, older man appeared. His long hair hung across his face, and when he extended a big, rough hand, I noticed part of his index finger was missing. "I'm Skip Hanratty," he said. He led me into one of the offices, which looked more like a woodworking tornado had hit it. Papers, catalogs, and random blocks of wood everywhere. He sat down, kicked his feet up on the desk, and asked me what I knew about logging. I told him the truth. Not much. Not exactly the strongest pitch. He narrowed his eyes. "Then why the hell are you wasting my time?" I froze, totally thrown off. I didn't know what to say. After an uncomfortable silence, I finally blurted out, "Mr. Hanratty, I need a job. I'll work hard. That's a promise." He just stared at me. 30 long seconds of silence. I was already wondering what other job postings might still be on the board at the counseling center when he finally spoke. "Be here tomorrow at 3:30, be ready to work." I was stunned. I stood up, shook his hand, and headed out. As I walked away, I noticed a tall, balding man peek out from the last office and look at me curiously. I had no way of knowing it then, but that moment would set the course for everything that followed in my life. Let's rewind to that Friday afternoon in April. I was out on the patio chatting with Mike. "I'm off this weekend," I told him. "There's just a bunch of stuff I really need to wrap up in time." Then it hit me. "Wait, tomorrow's Saturday. There's something going on at the fairgrounds and I'm supposed to be there." "Megan's inviting a few friends," he said casually, "and I want you to come with me." Truthfully, I wouldn't have minded tagging along, but I had to pretend I did. Before I could object, Mike cut me off. "I'll swing by at 11. Right then, my phone buzzed. Well, looks like I'm headed to the spring fair. I first crossed paths with Mike Robinson the same day I met my ex. By the time junior high ended, I had a regular job at Specialty, 5 days a week from 3:30 to 6, and some Saturdays if they needed help. Eventually, I bought a used Corolla. It had a lot of miles but ran great and was easy on gas. The money I made covered my insurance and fuel, and I still had about $10 a week left to give to my mom. When summer came, I was glad to start working full-time, 7 to 3:30 every day. On the Tuesday after Memorial Day, I got there early for my first full shift. My supervisor was a lean guy named Don Smith. Everyone just called him Smitty. He'd already been supervising me during my after-school hours. Smitty managed the machines, handled inventory, oversaw shipping and receiving. He basically kept the whole place running. He taught me a ton, and that summer I was going to get deeper into how the milling and plywood machines worked. My role was mostly maintenance. Everything I knew I picked up from Smitty. That Tuesday, he laid out my schedule. 15-minute break at 10 o'clock, lunch at noon for half an hour, and then clock out at 3:30. At 10 sharp, he told me to head over to the break room, one I hadn't used before. It was across the office, just past the women's restroom. As I stepped into the office, I noticed a smirking kid, kind of punkish, probably laughing at how I looked. "Hey, Smitty, trying to start a power shortage?" he joked. I was wearing a set of old coveralls Smitty had given me. The name patch still said Dawn, and the fabric was smudged with grease from the machines. But the worst part wasn't the coveralls. Laughter broke out, this time from a girl about my age. She was pretty and couldn't help but giggle while trying to cover her amusement. I had no idea who either of them were. I'd never seen them at Specialty before. Just then, the owner, a tall guy I recognized from my interview, shouted at them to cut it out. Without saying anything, I made a beeline for the break room, eager to avoid the two smug strangers. As I sat there nursing a coffee and my pride, the tall man walked in. In all my time there, I'd never spoken a word to him. "Ignore them. Those two brats are my kids. They're just working here for the summer," he said. "Frankly, I'm not even sure what Mike's getting paid for." He extended a hand. "Ted Robinson." I stood up and shook it. "Cameron Joseph," I said, a little awkwardly. "Nice to meet you, Cameron." "Smitty says good things. Let's touch base again this summer. And seriously, don't pay attention to those two jerks." And just like that, I'd been introduced to Mike and Kimberly Robinson. Saturday morning rolled around and I heard a car horn honking, Mike's sleek black BMW only 20 minutes behind schedule. "Where's Meg?" I asked, getting in. Mike, looking sharp as ever with dark glasses, slick hair, and a golden tan, answered, "She's grabbing coffee downtown with Brandy and Celia. We're meeting them at the fair." Brandy and Celia. Something about this had the feel of a setup. We parked a few blocks away and strolled toward the fairgrounds. Mike had to drop off some promotional material. His company, RA, was one of the event sponsors. "The girls are working the booths," he added. As we approached, I spotted Megan, radiant as usual, and next to her stood a stunning blonde. Megan gave Mike a quick kiss, then turned to introduce me to Brandy and Celia. Brandy had long, sleek dark hair, a killer figure, and a polished, slightly stiff vibe. She was showing just enough cleavage to make me focus on eye contact when we shook hands. Celia was totally different. She had curly black hair, an athletic build, and an engaging smile. When she looked at me, she really looked direct, confident, curious. "Nice to meet you, Cameron. I've heard a bit about you," she said. I glanced over at Megan, who gave me a knowing smile. Okay, maybe this weekend wasn't going to be so bad. The five of us wandered around the fair together. I often found myself beside Celia. She had this great way of keeping eye contact that made conversations feel easy and genuine. She laughed freely, and somehow that made me feel funnier than usual, like I had some kind of charm. Every so often, I'd catch Mike looking over and smiling. It turned out to be a great day. We spent hours exploring the exhibits, bumping into familiar faces and just enjoying ourselves. Mike seemed to know half the people there. It was great for his networking and for his business. We chose to head over to Mallory's for a drink and hoped to snag an open table outside. Brandy bowed out early, citing a headache, and Mike offered to give Celia a lift, so that was sorted. We lucked out and found an ideal spot on the patio, clear skies, warm sun, the whole deal. Mike launched into a series of hilarious stories, tales from work, married life, and his quirky relatives. I couldn't quite recall the last time I'd felt so relaxed, so entertained. Celia turned out to be easy to talk to, sharp, engaging, and genuinely curious about who I was. Somewhere around Mike's third drink, I casually mentioned needing to run the next morning. Celia asked where I liked to jog, and before I knew it, we'd made a plan to meet Sunday at 9 a.m. We actually followed through. That morning was a blast, chatting with Celia, laughing, swapping stories. There was a natural rhythm to being with her, and something just clicked. I found myself hoping she wasn't already in some kind of relationship. After the run, we drove her home, and I told her I'd swing by at 9 next time to hit the rhododendron trail. As soon as we pulled away, I caught a glance from Mike in the front seat. "What?" I asked, catching his grin. "Okay, yes, she's great. What do you want me to say?" "I'll run with her again tomorrow," I added, and Mike just shook his head, grinning. Wow, that didn't take long. Since my divorce from Kim, Mike had taken it upon himself to help me find someone new. I think he felt a bit guilty about how things ended, especially since Kim was his sister. Maybe he'd suspected things about her sexuality all along, but never said a word. After high school soccer ended, I took a job at Specialty Timbers for my entire senior year. I even clocked in on Saturdays once fall rolled around. Smitty taught me everything there was to know about the equipment, how it worked, how to keep it running. On the busiest weeks, I was called in to help out with machinery, handling nearly everything but the veneer press. Kim often showed up on Saturdays, too. She helped with the accounting side of things. She was attending a private school across town, so weekends were the only time we could hang out. She wasn't like the other kids from Money. She was kind, funny, down to earth. By mid-senior year, our friendship had quietly evolved into something more. We were both working at Specialty that summer. I hadn't figured out my fall plans yet, but Kim was headed to Colorado College. I worried about the distance, about missing her, about other guys. What I didn't realize was that guys were never the threat. When I opened up to her about all of this, she'd just smile and say, "You don't have to worry. You're the only guy for me." And she meant it. She just left out the part about girls. At summer's end, Ted Robinson, Kim's dad and my boss, pulled me aside. He asked what I had in mind for the future. Honestly, I had no clue. There was a Lane Community College application sitting on my dresser, but even with the low tuition, I couldn't afford it. Mr. Hanreddy had cancer and was barely around anymore, just a few days a week. Ted told me, "Cameron, you know our store. You're good with people. I need young blood in the office." He said he'd thought about putting me back with Smitty sometimes, but mostly he wanted me to learn the business end, how things worked behind the scenes. I was stunned. He offered me $3,000 a month and promised year-end bonuses during good times. I agreed immediately, though I couldn't help wondering if dating his daughter played a role. That Monday, I showed up in my usual work gear, and Ted promptly sent me home to change. From that point, I dove into office work. Ted had a sharp mind for business and a calm, confident way with customers. While I already understood the machinery and the products, I knew nothing about pricing, client management, or accounting. Ted was a steady teacher, patient, clear, and encouraging. Once the initial nerves passed, I found I enjoyed learning from him. Even with Kim off at college, we stayed close, and I believed our relationship stayed strong through the fall. Then Sunday came, and I picked up Celia right on time, 9 a.m. sharp, for our run. She looked incredible. We chatted lightly on the way to the trailhead. "I usually do a 5-mile loop," I said. Is that okay? She nodded, no problem. We did a quick warm-up and hit the path. Usually when you run with someone new, there's some awkward pacing. You speed up or slow down to match. But not with Celia. We locked into the same rhythm without effort. As we walked a bit after, we talked more. Turns out she's a dental hygienist, originally from the Bay Area. Her dad had passed away. He worked for the railroad. Her mother works at a hair salon that's owned by her aunt. Her mom's side is Italian. Her full name? Anna Maria Saltilli. That's where her thick, curly, dark hair clearly came from. We chatted non-stop during our 5-mile loop, returning to the car by 10:30. It felt amazing. I could have easily gone another 5 miles with her. I suggested grabbing some coffee, so we found a nearby cafe and made our way there. While heading home afterward, I heard from Mike and Megan that neither of them knew about any current boyfriends or love interests in her life. I ran a quick mental checklist. No boyfriend, confirmed. She's easy to talk to and seems genuinely interested in me. She's beautiful. For the first time in a long while, it felt like maybe things were finally going my way. But reality reminded me I still had plenty to take care of at home. The fireplace tile job was only halfway done, and the shower board was still sitting untouched in the garage. "Celia, I'm having an incredible time with you, but I've got to get back home," I told her. "I'd really love to see you again next weekend." "Are you around?" "Yeah, I think so." "Want to do something on Saturday?" she replied. We exchanged numbers and parted ways. I thought about hugging her or even going in for a kiss. There was a connection, something sincere and strong between us. But I decided not to rush it and let things unfold naturally. Still, I felt incredibly uplifted when I got home and threw myself into my home projects with fresh energy. At the start of the week, I brought up the idea of a weekend getaway and asked when might be a good time. After work on Monday, I texted her, asking if she'd be interested in hiking to Rainbow Falls during the day and then grabbing dinner afterward. She responded enthusiastically and even added a heart emoji. It would be our first real date. Tuesday turned out to be chaotic at Specialty Timbers. Ted was in Seattle negotiating with a big potential client, leaving me to handle all the fires. A late delivery, a frustrated customer, and one of the milling machines breaking down while Smitty was using it, everything seemed to go wrong at once. I didn't get back home until after 7 p.m., completely wiped out. As I was waiting for a frozen pizza to thaw, my phone buzzed. "Now what?" I muttered. To my surprise and relief, it was a message from Celia. Just seeing her name brightened everything. We ended up texting back and forth for more than an hour. It felt so easy, so natural. It hadn't even been a full week yet. But I was genuinely excited about someone for the first time in years. Wednesday evening, I sent her another message, and once again, we had a great exchange. Thursday, she beat me to it and reached out first. We talked through the details of our Saturday plans. Later that night, I rang Mike, catching him and Megan during dinner. He promised to call back, and did, while they were on the road. "Hey, Romeo, what's the update?" he teased. Megan laughed in the background. "Just wanted to hear how dinner went," I said, though I was really trying to steer the conversation towards Celia. I didn't want to sound too full of myself with Megan listening in. "Please, you don't care about our dinner," Mike said. Megan added, "We know you've got plans with Celia this weekend. Must have gone well, huh?" I kept it casual, said the run was great and she seemed like a good person. "So, you sleep with her yet?" Mike asked bluntly. "Don't be gross," Megan jumped in, chuckling. "Not everyone's wired like you." We kept joking around for a bit longer before wrapping up the call. "Man, I haven't heard you this into someone since my sister," Mike said. I admitted I really liked Celia so far. As we were hanging up, I caught Megan's voice. "Just be careful, Cam." I found myself wondering what she meant. Friday after work, I finished my jog and was relaxing on the back porch with a beer. Amazing what a week can change. The previous Friday, I'd felt like hell. This time, I felt alive again. Around 8 p.m., I texted Celia, partly to confirm plans, partly just to hear from her. By 9:30, there was no reply, which was a little out of the ordinary. Still, I figured I'd see her the next day, so I let it go. I picked her up at 1 p.m. on Saturday and we drove east, climbing into the mountains toward the trailhead. Right away, something felt a bit different. She was still kind, still showed some warmth, but her usual spark was missing. When I asked how she was doing, she replied, "I'm just kind of worn out. It's been a long week." Before I could ask for more, she changed the subject to the hike. No further explanation. Still, we enjoyed the trail. Eventually, it widened and we walked side by side. She reached out and took my hand. That simple gesture after a week apart felt wonderful. Our plan was for me to drop her off so she could change and get cleaned up before dinner at Masaletto's downtown at 7. She looked stunning in her fitted jeans and snug top. The moment I arrived, she greeted me with a warm embrace and a kiss. I couldn't help but think that if I played my cards right, we'd probably end up in her bed before long. Still, I reminded myself to take a different approach this time. The restaurant had a cozy charm, excellent food, and an impressive wine selection. We split a bottle and finished our meal with dessert and a glass of brandy each. Knowing I needed to sober up a bit before driving, I suggested we go for a stroll around the plaza. It's a charming pedestrian area in the heart of the city, surrounded by cafes, boutiques, bars, and eateries. The evening was mild and pleasant. As we walked, Celia tucked herself into my side, and we ambled along, both of us feeling slightly buzzed but genuinely content. We chatted with ease, weaving through couples and small groups enjoying the night. As we made our way back, I spotted a bunch of young guys ahead. As we passed them at an angle, one of them suddenly called out, "CC!" I instantly became cautious, but Celia stepped toward them with a smile and accepted hugs from all three. "Hey, girl!" "What are you doing here?" one of them asked. Meanwhile, I stood a few feet away, uncertain of what exactly was happening. It felt longer, but after about a minute, Celia turned to me, cheeks flushed, and said, "Cameron, these are my friends, Bobby, JT, and Marcus." I instinctively offered a handshake. The three of them exchanged glances, smirked, and then greeted me with exaggerated, almost comical handshakes filled with twists and flicks. The four of them launched into a 10-minute conversation about something I didn't quite grasp, something involving music and a place called Evolution. I'd heard of it vaguely. As I watched, it was obvious they shared a kind of camaraderie. I picked up on an especially close vibe between Celia and Marcus that made me uneasy. Whatever warmth I'd been feeling up until that point quickly vanished. Celia clearly enjoyed their energy and attention. When they finally said their goodbyes, with hugs and kisses, I politely said, "Nice meeting you." Marcus just gave a nod, and they walked off in the opposite direction. Barely a few seconds passed before I heard their laughter echoing down the street. Celia curled up next to me again, but something had shifted. The lightness in her demeanor was gone. I found myself wondering, were those really the kind of people she hung out with? There was nothing inherently wrong with them. They just weren't my crowd. She gave me a brief backstory. Apparently, Evolution was a club in the old part of town, once a warehouse, now a popular spot. She described how lively and fun it was and said we should go sometime. I chuckled and confessed that I was a terrible dancer. "No one cares," she said. "It's just about having fun." We drove back to her place. I tried to stay upbeat, but something about that encounter lingered. I wasn't as affectionate as I'd been earlier. At her doorstep, I walked her to the hallway and gave her a gentle hug. "Want to come up for some coffee?" she asked. Normally, I wouldn't have hesitated, but a mix of wanting to do the right thing and a need to protect myself emotionally held me back. "Thanks," I said, "but I'm good. I'll catch you later." I hugged her again, kissed her on the cheek, and left. During Kimberly's freshman and sophomore years at Colorado College, we stayed close. We always saw each other at her family's holiday get-togethers. I genuinely looked forward to those visits, and I knew she did too. Maybe not as much as I did, but close. When I asked her about college life, she usually didn't say much. Sometimes I'd get insecure and ask about the guys she knew at school. One day, perhaps I pushed too hard. With sudden seriousness, she grabbed my shirt, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I told you there's no one else. Drop it." Then she turned and left the restaurant. For the most part, we got along just fine. In my mind, I had built this ideal future. Kimberly and I together, running specialty timbers side by side. It felt like a dream that might actually come true. I learned a great deal from her father, Ted. He and I had an easy, respectful relationship. I believe he was pleased with how things were going between Kimberly and me. Compared to her ex, Mike, I was a different breed altogether. Mike was smart, loud, and charming. He'd gone to UCLA and struggled to keep up, partying constantly. I think Ted eventually had a serious heart-to-heart with him about life. Mike did finish college, but it was a rocky road. I wasn't flashy like Mike, but I made up for it with dedication and skill, especially when it came to woodworking. Ted respected that. He never saw Mike as someone who'd have a future with the company. I, on the other hand, was already being considered for something long-term, professionally and personally. Ted was definitely rooting for me. Then came the turning point. Just before Kimberly's junior year, I asked her to marry me. Her response? She said she needed time to think about it. Around the middle of that year, Kim asked for some time apart. I was devastated. I had thrown myself completely into my job. We still saw each other occasionally, and our bond remained intact. But Kim was going through an identity crisis of her own. During our junior year, we barely crossed paths. We stayed in touch through emails and phone calls, and now and then I'd catch her during visits home. We worked side by side all summer, though I made a point to respect the distance she asked for. As senior year rolled on, our contact faded even more. I even went on a few casual dates, not that they meant much. Then, out of nowhere, Kim started reaching out again like old times. But when I asked what she wanted, she said she still needed space. That summer, she returned, we began seeing each other again, and she asked if I'd still be willing to marry her. The question caught me off guard, but I said yes with no hesitation. We tied the knot that Christmas. I felt fulfilled. Ted was thrilled. And if I had to describe Kim in hindsight, I'd say she was content, but not much more than that. But back then, I was too consumed by the fantasy of finally having a partner, a stable career, and a father figure to notice. For a time, everything felt like it had fallen into place. Kim and I worked at Specialty Timbers together. Things were looking up. I was learning new skills. My relationship with Ted continued to grow and strengthen. To my surprise, even things with Mike, my new son-in-law, began to improve. Despite his inflated ego and self-centered streak, Mike was fiercely loyal, and for reasons I never understood, he genuinely seemed to like me. For the first couple of years, life seemed stable, happy even. But eventually, the cracks began to show. The first major fracture was in our intimacy. By the start of our third year, we were sleeping together once, maybe twice a month. Looking back, I can now see she simply didn't enjoy it. Then Millie entered the picture. She was a friend of Kim's from Colorado. Her full name was Ming Lee Pham, but everyone just called her Millie. Using Ted's network, I was able to buy the house I still live in, only $125,000. It was in rough shape. The bank wouldn't approve a loan. So I bought it on a contract from Ted's former business partner, with the payments taken directly from my paycheck at Specialty. The arrangement was confusing, but Mike convinced me it was the smartest route. I got the place livable, and Kim never complained. There was a small outbuilding behind the house with working plumbing and electricity. Millie moved in and turned it into her art studio. Over time, Kim noticed that Millie seemed to spend more time in that cottage than she did in our actual home. Millie was always kind to me, no friction, no weird vibes. Then, 6 months in, Kim approached me with tears in her eyes and confessed she had fallen in love with Millie. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. There was no yelling, no accusations. I felt like the world dropped out beneath me. I wept, hard, for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The sorrow was overwhelming. I realized that my whole world, my marriage, my work, my social circle, was tied up in Kim. Now all of it had to be redefined. I shut down, didn't leave the house for 3 days. Dark thoughts began to settle, dark enough that I seriously considered ending everything. That's when Mike arrived. He started talking. Then we had an actual conversation. He listened. He made a quick call, and 30 minutes later, Ted showed up. Ted told me plainly that no matter what happened with Kim, I still had a place at Specialty. Mike informed my father that I needed a break, and Ted agreed. So Mike and I hit the road for a while. We drank, we talked, I cried again. Somewhere on the drive home, things started to come into focus. Yes, I was hurting, but I had a job I loved. I had a boss and a father figure I deeply respected. And strangely enough, I had found a real friend in Mike. Even Kim and I found a kind of peace between us. The divorce was smooth, no battles, no demands. I got to keep the house. And the biggest surprise of all? Millie was incredibly kind and supportive throughout. There were rough patches, but I had people who honestly cared about me, and that helped more than I can say. I promised myself that before I let another woman get close to me, I'd make sure to protect myself first. Later, after dropping Celia off, I was left trying to make sense of my own reaction. Meeting her friends hadn't been anything extraordinary. Still, I felt a little disrespected, by them and by her. Then again, it was only our second date. She was free to have her own life and her own circle. But something about the way she interacted with those guys left me unsettled. Too familiar, too close. It didn't match the image I had of her in my head. Maybe it was time to take a step back. The next day was Sunday, and I needed to finish fixing the fireplace and take care of some dry rot. After breakfast, I popped in my earbuds, turned on a podcast, and lost myself in the work. There was something deeply satisfying about renovating the house to my own standards. Owning it, shaping it, it made me feel grounded and proud. In the middle of the afternoon, I checked my phone. 2 messages, one from Mike just checking in, and one from Celia. Brandy and I were sipping our coffee, enjoying the pleasant weather. I thought back to the night before. It lingered in my mind. Was I overreacting, or was my gut telling me something important? I couldn't be sure. I needed more time to process it. Later that day, I sent a neutral message, short and vague. "Hope you're having fun?" That was all. The conversation ended there. Then on Monday evening, she reached out again. "How was your day?" she asked. I waited a few hours before responding with a simple, "Good. How about you?" Her reply was a long one. She went on about her job and told a funny story involving a dental patient. I didn't write back. Nothing came in on Tuesday night, and that gave me a bit of peace. On Wednesday evening, she called. I answered politely, but without much energy. Eventually, she asked what was going on. I didn't answer right away, so she followed up. Was I upset with her? I told her no. Just busy, that's all. She asked me to have dinner with her on Saturday night. I agreed. Maybe I had blown things out of proportion. I decided to let it go and see where things went. Saturday night's dinner turned out to be lovely. She cooked a great meal, and her apartment looked amazing, carefully styled and welcoming. I began to relax and feel hopeful again. Later that evening, one thing led to another, and we ended up in bed. It was incredible. We spent all of Sunday together. The intimacy between us deepened. We went for a jog, and this time we showered at my place. I gave her a tour of the work I'd been doing around my house. There was an old redwood hot tub I had salvaged from a job site, and I pointed out where I planned to install it in the backyard. Celia seemed genuinely interested in the renovation projects and impressed by my carpentry. She also seemed to really like my place. Over the following few weeks, we kept seeing each other regularly, about 3 times a week. We also kept in touch daily, whether by call or text. At one point, when my resolve was a bit soft, I agreed to join her at a club called Evolution on a Friday night. Dancing isn't exactly my thing. I can hold my own on the floor, but I suspected this wasn't really my scene. Still, her excitement was infectious, and I gave in. Evolution was a new hotspot in the old warehouse district, modern, loud, and buzzing with energy. I'd heard of it, but had never actually been. I told myself that in any strong relationship, compromise is necessary. This would be one of those moments. We got there just before 9. Celia seemed to know half the room, staff, patrons, everyone. Inside, it was dark with flashing lights and DJs playing from raised platforms. The dance floor was packed and the heat was intense. We found a table and sat down, but before long, Brandy showed up, laughing and hugging some guy. The noise made it hard to have any real conversation. Celia grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. She could really move, while I felt like I didn't quite fit in. Before long, we were swallowed by the crowd. I started to lose track. Was I still dancing with her, or had someone else taken my place? I kept watching her. She was clearly having a blast. Eventually, I leaned in and told her I was heading to the bar for a drink. She just smiled and nodded, not missing a beat. I waited a moment, half expecting her to come with me. She didn't. Back at our table, I stood there, catching glimpses of her through the strobe-lit crowd. None of the people from that earlier downtown group had shown up yet. After a while, she returned, took a quick sip of her drink, and I could tell she was itching to get back on the floor. So we went. Things were going fine, until I got better acquainted with some of the guys from that downtown crew. One guy in particular stood out, Marcus. He could dance, and somehow he edged his way in, practically making it a dance between him and Celia. I tried stepping in but got elbowed. It might have been an accident, but I had my doubts. This continued for a bit, and finally I leaned in to tell her I'd get her another drink, if she wanted one. Again, just a smile and a nod, and she kept dancing. I made my way to the bar, picked up our drinks, and went back to our table. I checked the time. It was a little after 11. I was more than ready to leave. I waited. Eventually, she came back, grinning, laughing, Marcus right behind her. She kissed my cheek, which was damp with sweat, and took her drink. She took a small sip from the glass, but Marcus snatched it from her and finished it off. Celia just laughed. "Let's dance," she said, tugging at my hand. "I'm good. I've had enough for tonight," I replied. "Just one more?" she pressed. Before I could respond, Marcus stepped in. "I'll dance with you," he said, and they disappeared into the crowd. I stood there seething, and then it got worse. While I watched from the sidelines, they started grinding on the dance floor. His hands were all over her, and she looked like she was having the time of her life. I felt the anger rise in my chest. A glance at my watch told me it was after midnight. I was done. I decided to give her until 12:30. After that, I was out. At 12:28, she finally returned. Without a word, I took her hand and led us toward the exit. I was furious but kept my composure. No yelling, no scene. On the way back to her place, she went on and on about how much fun she had. How amazing the music was, how much she loved dancing. It didn't seem to faze her that I hadn't said a single word. When we pulled up in front of her building, she looked confused. "I thought we were crashing at your place tonight." "I'm good," I said with a tight smile. "Maybe another time." She gave a curious look but didn't push it. I kissed her goodnight, smiled again, and drove off. This wasn't how our nights usually ended, not for the past several weeks. The next day passed without a single message between us. I was torn. I genuinely liked her, maybe more than that. But what happened at the club had left a sour taste. And her chemistry with Marcus? It felt like more than just friendship. The weekend kept me busy. I spent most of Saturday and Sunday trying to reposition the heavy mahogany hot tub on the deck. Sunday night, I noticed a casual text from her. "Hey, how are you?" I didn't reply. Monday evening, another message came in. "I miss our talks. Call me?" Feeling obligated, I texted back. "Sorry, been swamped. Let's meet tomorrow?" "Okay," she responded. But Tuesday came and I still didn't feel ready. I left her hanging again. By Wednesday, I got home from work around 6 and saw her black Volkswagen parked out front. There she was, waiting on the back porch. "What's going on?" she asked. "Are you breaking up with me?" There was frustration in her voice. I took a deep breath. "Celia, I honestly don't know. I'm dealing with a lot." "Like what?" she asked. So I told her. I started with my failed marriage to Kim, how that hurt still lingered. Then I admitted how jealous I was of Marcus, and how humiliated I felt watching them at the club. I poured it all out. Why not? I thought this might be the last time I'd see her. She sat silently, eyes fixed on mine, and then the tears came. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly. "If giving up that scene means I get to keep you, I'll never go back. I want to be with you. I miss you. And I think I might be falling in love with you." I was stunned. I'd braced for goodbye, not confessions of love. But in that moment, everything shifted. She promised again, no more clubs, no more that crowd. "I didn't know it upset you." If I had, I wouldn't have asked you to come. That night, we made up in my bed. The months that followed were some of our best. We traveled, laughed, and spent almost every night together. We even took a week-long trip to Hawaii, my first time there. We mingled with my friends and a few of hers, but never with Marcus. I never brought up his name again. By the time the holidays rolled around, we'd been together nearly 8 months. She was staying over most nights, and we started talking about living together. We celebrated the season with my family and the Robinsons. She got along with everyone except Millie. For reasons I still don't quite understand, there was a weird tension between them. After the new year, business picked up. We were making strong sales across Northern California and Puget Sound. The construction boom had ramped up demand for our products. Then one week, Ted asked if we could meet on Thursday evening. "Sure," I said. "Everything okay?" "We'll talk then," he replied vaguely. Thursday was hectic. and it was already 5 o'clock before I knew it. We sat down in his office. The formality made me a little uneasy. Ted told me he was turning 60 this year and starting to think about long-term plans. In place of your usual bonus, he said, I'm giving you a 9% stake in Specialty Timbers. I was floored. That wasn't what I was expecting. He went on. We've done well expanding into NorCal and Western Washington, as you know. Now we're seeing strong demand out in Colorado and in the mountain resort areas. Then he looked at me. I want you to lead that expansion. It'll mean some travel, maybe a week out of every month. Sound good? Absolutely, I said. I hadn't seen much of the country, and the thought of exploring it while helping grow the business was thrilling. And being made a co-owner? That was beyond anything I'd hoped for. I felt like everything, my career, my relationship, was finally falling into place. I was truly happy. He informed me that he now held a 51% stake in the company, while Mike and Kim each possessed 20%, leaving me with the remaining 9%. Kim handled the finances as CFO, and Mike was in charge of the entire financial operations. I asked Ted if Kim and Mike were comfortable with me becoming a partner in the business. They're the ones who suggested it, he said. Then he added, one more thing you should know. Smitty would be retiring at the end of the year. Millie's brother, John Pham, was set to start working alongside Smitty at the store. I'd like you to keep an eye on him too, Ted said. Absolutely, I told him. I was eager to tell Celia about my new ownership role and the fact that I'd be traveling more. I was elated, on top of the world. Celia was happy for me about becoming an owner, though not nearly as thrilled about the travel part. How long will you be gone each time? She asked. I explained it would typically be just a few days each month. That answer seemed to put her more at ease. I jumped into the role immediately, and within 2 weeks I found myself on a business trip to Denver. I believe my no-nonsense familiarity with our products and how things worked gave me a solid edge. Even while I was still settling into the job, orders had already started rolling in. When I received my March paycheck, I noticed an extra $1,500 deposited into my account. Curious, I reached out to Kim. That's your commission, she explained. We pay 3% of the total sales. Didn't he mention that? I crunched the numbers and realized that selling $500,000 in a year wasn't far-fetched. That would mean an additional $15,000 annually on top of my base pay. It looked like my total income this year would be flirting with 6 figures. We scheduled another Hawaii trip for September, and I began seriously considering proposing to Celia. After the rocky times we'd had, things finally seemed to be falling into place. Work was going well, and the commission money gave me a boost to accelerate renovations on the house. The property was spacious and all on one level, with a separate guest house tucked into the backyard. The main home had 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a large open kitchen, a dedicated office, and a cozy family room that flowed right from the kitchen. The guest house was a 1-room unit with a bathroom and a compact kitchen. I often found myself working in the garden. That garden had become my sanctuary, and with the addition of a mahogany hot tub, it felt like a private retreat. In May, Celia gave up her apartment and officially moved in with me. Having her there was amazing, and for the most part, life was great. We did experience some tension when I was away on business, but I assumed it was just something we'd adapt to over time. Come August, I invited Mike over for dinner to talk about something important. We met up at a bar near his office around 6 in the evening. The weather was nice, so we grabbed a table outside. What's going on, man? He asked. I've decided I'm going to propose to Celia, I told him. And I want you to be my best man. He looked at me in silence for a good 60 seconds. You're thinking about getting married again? He said finally. Have you forgotten how last time turned out? This is different, I insisted. I've grown. Back then, I was just a kid. Neither Kim nor I had a clue what we were doing. But that was then. I love her. I don't want to go through life alone. Are you really sure about her? He asked. I remember some fists flying not too long ago. We kept talking, and although his words made me anxious, as if he were trying to talk me out of it, I knew his concern came from a place of care. I valued Mike's opinion, but he didn't know Celia the way I did. I still want you to be my best man, I said. I told him my plan. I'd proposed to her during our trip to Kauai. We toasted with a shot of tequila, and the night ended on a great note. 2 weeks later, I headed back to Denver for another business trip. I needed some sample pieces to present to clients, so I dropped by the store on a Friday when Smitty was off. As I gathered what I needed and moved toward the saw, a voice called out, "What can I help you with, boss?" It was John Pham. "I've got it, John." "Thanks," I replied. Without hesitation, he walked over, took the materials from me, cut everything to size, packed them into boxes, and handed them back. "If there's anything else you need, I've got you covered," he said. He made a strong impression, clearly a capable young guy. "Thanks, John. I really mean it." "If you ever need an extra hand, my cousin's a solid worker," John offered. "Appreciate that, and just call me Cam," I replied. "Sure thing, boss." So, when I was last in Colorado, I looked into a place called Longfellow's. This time, though, I had an actual meeting lined up, Monday at 11, with Junior Longfellow. The meeting took place just outside of Denver, at their office. Junior was about my age, with sun-bleached hair pulled into a ponytail and a scruffy blonde beard. We hit it off right away, and what was supposed to be a short appointment stretched well into the afternoon. They weren't just potential clients, they seemed like the real deal. And I liked Junior. As we wrapped up, he mentioned he'd be touring the West Coast in November and was eager to check out our operations. These tours were always great for making connections. I told him I had a trip to Montana planned for 1 week in November, but that I'd follow up. Then came the trip to Kauai. Unreal. We booked a stay at one of the top resorts, and the commission I'd earned helped cover the cost. Between lounging by the pool and walking the beach, we hiked, snorkeled, and kayaked. It was the perfect mix of active and restful. On our second-to-last night, we sat on the balcony as the sun dipped into the horizon. That's when I gave her the ring and asked her to marry me. She cried, held me tight, and we ended up back in bed together. Lying there afterward, I asked if she was happy. "I am," she said softly. "If there's anything you'd change about our life, what would it be?" I asked. She paused. "Honestly, I just wish you didn't travel so much." I told her I'd try to scale things back, that it was all part of building our future. "Maybe," I said, "she could come with me sometimes." "Okay," she murmured. I brushed it off a little too fast without much thought. Life continued on, now with wedding plans in full swing. We picked Valentine's Day for the big day. Celia took the reins on most of the details, and I made sure to support her however I could. Things at work got busy. Our expansion into the Rocky Mountain region increased demand, and we brought on new help, John's cousin Nathan Nguyen and one of their friends, Van. With Smitty preparing to move on, I made a point of getting closer to John. He impressed me, sharp, dependable, and genuinely hard-working. One evening, John invited me out for drinks with him, Nathan, and Van. They were good guys, friendly, motivated, and fully on board with our mission at Specialty. Everything in life seemed to be going right. I even decided to remodel the kitchen. I hired a contractor I knew. He was actually in the process of buying a house from us. I could have tackled it myself, but it would have dragged on for months, and I didn't want our home disrupted for that long. Celia got involved with the design, and although we didn't always agree, her input made the end result better. At the end of October, I had another trip scheduled. Celia wasn't thrilled and started asking if I could cut it down, 3 days instead of 5. But I knew there was no way to cram everything into a shorter trip. Coincidentally, that same week was when Junior planned to be in town for a tour of our mill. I wouldn't be around for it, but Ted offered to host him, which was a relief. I had a trade show in Montana, a key opportunity to showcase what we'd been working on. The event kicked off early Friday, then ran through Friday evening and all of Saturday. I had a flight out of Billings early Sunday morning. Friday's turnout was strong. That night there was a cocktail mixer at 8, and I had a number of promising conversations throughout the day. Every night while I was away, I made it a point to call Celia and check in. That Friday, I got back to the hotel just before 10 and tried calling. No answer. She might have been in the shower or already asleep. I tried again around 10:30. Still nothing. I assumed she'd just gone to bed early. Saturday morning, I slept in a bit, got up at 7, and worked out in the small hotel gym. I called her around 8:15. Again, no response. After a quick shower, I noticed I'd missed a call from her. I called back right away. "Hey, looks like we keep missing each other. How are you?" She answered, but her tone felt off. There was none of the warmth I expected. "I called a few times last night," I said. "Did you turn in early?" "No, I just had my phone off." "I was working in the kitchen," she replied. "Did they finish the tile installation?" I asked. We carried on chatting about the kitchen remodel, neither of us mentioning the fact that she hadn't answered her phone the night before. With Thanksgiving approaching that Monday, we had plans to celebrate with the Robinsons. Celia hadn't quite been herself all week, quieter than usual, withdrawn. Maybe the upcoming holiday was wearing on her nerves. I didn't bring up her mood. Around that time, I got an invite from the Longfellows, a new client we'd just landed in Denver, for their annual Christmas party, scheduled for the evening of December 9th, a Thursday. We talked about the idea of Celia coming with me, but between her workload and mine, it just made more sense for me to go solo. The Longfellows had gone all out, decking out their warehouse in full holiday cheer. I knew there'd be alcohol, so I gave her a call from the hotel to check in. It turned out to be a fun night. Later on, I found myself chatting with Junior about our recent Hawaii trip. I pulled out some photos on my phone to show him. One of them had Celia in it. "Wait, let me see that again," he said, squinting. "Is that your fiancée?" "Yeah, that's her," I replied, smiling with pride. He handed the phone back, paused, then took it again and stared at the picture more seriously. "What's up?" I asked. "Does she know someone named Brandy?" he asked, eyes still locked on the screen. "Yeah, why?" I replied, uncertain. "I could be off, but I'm pretty sure I saw her and a woman named Brandy at a club when I was in your city last month," he said. "And honestly, they didn't seem like two women who were taken. Definitely not like someone engaged." That would have been the weekend I was in Montana. A wave of heat flushed through me, part anger, part embarrassment. I asked him to tell me everything he remembered. "Okay," he said. "It was Friday night after the mill tour. I went out with another guy to this club. Dust, I think it was called. You know the type. Dark, loud, crowded. At one point, Sean, the guy I was with, started dancing with Brandy. He said she was down to head back to the hotel, but later both her and your girl were hanging with other dudes. I didn't catch all their names, but they gave off a bad vibe." "Wait, did you hear the name Marcus?" I asked. "Yeah, that's the one," Junior nodded. "He seemed close to your fiancée." He paused, then looked me square in the eye. "Look, Cam, I like you, man. You're my friend. And honestly, if the roles were reversed, I'd want someone to tell me." I nodded slowly. "I get it. I do. Thanks for telling me. But I should head out." I hugged him tightly and left the party, my thoughts racing. I was agitated, turning everything over in my mind. First, she told me she was done going to dance clubs. That alone made my blood boil. Second, what exactly was the deal with Marcus? She had lied. The only question now was, how deep did it go? I barely got a wink of sleep that night. To make matters worse, my flight home was delayed. Celia sent me text after text, but I didn't respond. Then, just as I was boarding, she finally called. "When are you getting home?" she asked. "Flight's been pushed back. I won't be in until around 6, if not later," I told her. "Oh, that's a shame. I love you. I miss you," she said. "See you tonight," I replied and hung up. On the drive home from the airport, I settled on a plan. I wanted to see if she'd lie to me again. When I walked in, I gave her a hug and a kiss like nothing was wrong. I checked out the progress in the kitchen and then casually said, "Hey, quick question." "Sure, babe. What's up?" "Remember when I was stuck in Montana for that trade show last month?" I asked. "What were you up to that Friday night?" She turned her back to me and replied softly, "Nothing much, just stayed in, really." "You sure about that?" I said, my tone firm but calm. "This is your last chance to give me the truth." She hesitated, then broke down crying and ran off to the bedroom. I stayed where I was, alone with the quiet, feeling a heavy mix of anger and heartbreak. I waited patiently. After 2 long hours, she finally came out and began to explain everything. The day before, she had spoken with Brandy, who suggested they check out a new club called Dust. Brandy knew I was out of town and insisted they were just going to scope the place out. But the night took on a life of its own. They stayed late, danced even later. And then? I pressed. I went home, she said. Alone? I asked. Yes, alone. And Brandy? She ended up staying over at her ex's place. So you really went home by yourself? Yes, she repeated. Anyone there I might know? She shrugged. Not really sure. Maybe. I can't say. From there, the conversation turned into an exhausting excavation. I had to work for every scrap of clarity. Slowly, the truth began to take shape. They went to the club, met up with a few familiar faces, danced for a while. Later in the night, Marcus and his friends arrived and they hung out briefly. She insisted she left around midnight. Did anything ever happen between you and Marcus? I asked. Never, she said flatly. But does he want something to happen? I continued. She hesitated. I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe. But to me, he's just a friend. You're the only one I want. Her voice cracked. I told her I needed some space to think and that she should stay at the cottage for now. Tears welled up in her eyes as she packed a bag and left quietly. The timing couldn't have been worse. We were on the brink of marriage. The holidays were almost here. Everything I'd planned for my future now hung in limbo. Needing perspective, I called Mike. He told me to come by Friday night. In the meantime, the days with Celia were tense and emotional. She swung between apologies and tears. I felt torn. My love for her hadn't vanished, but my trust in her had definitely taken a hit. And without trust, could love really stand? Friday came. I visited Mike and Megan at their sleek new place in the South Hills. I laid everything out, the timeline, the doubts, the details, and asked what they thought. Mike didn't mince words. If you can't trust someone, you probably shouldn't marry them. Hard to argue with that. Megan took a softer approach. I do feel a bit responsible. I introduced you two, and while I don't know Celia very well, I don't believe she's a bad person. In fact, I think she really loves you. That part I agreed with. Celia's feelings for me had never seemed fake. In the end, Megan added, it comes down to belief. Either you trust her or you don't. No one else can decide that for you. That night, I invited Celia over. We chatted about nothing for a few minutes, but I could see she was nervous. I told her I needed honest answers. Nothing held back. She nodded. I asked if she still felt drawn to the club scene. I asked for a clear account of what happened that night at Dust with Brandy. And most of all, I asked about her real relationship with Marcus. She said she didn't care about clubs, that it was never really her thing. Brandy had caught her during a lonely stretch. She'd been feeling isolated, restless, and just wanted a fun distraction. Yes, Marcus had flirted with her, but she insisted she wasn't interested. She admitted the male attention felt good for a moment, but that she hadn't crossed any lines. Maybe just a few unwelcome hands while dancing, nothing more. I listened. Her words rang true, matching the person I'd come to know. I told her this was a good beginning. She asked if she could sleep in our bed that night. I agreed. The holidays passed, and life moved forward. We continued with our wedding plans. I was still watchful, my instincts a little more alert than before. But nothing happened to shake my faith again. Celia was attentive, loving, and fully present. When I had a trip scheduled in January, she took time off and came with me. We spent the weekend in snowy Boulder, and it was genuinely wonderful. The whole Dust episode began to fade. By February, we were married in a small but beautiful ceremony. I met her mother, along with several relatives. It was intimate, fewer than 100 people, family, the Robinsons, and some close friends. Brandy was the only one there from her clubbing days. We honeymooned in St. Martin, down in the Caribbean. It was a completely different vibe from Hawaii. The ocean was warmer, calmer, and a stunning shade of blue. The island had a strong European flavor. It was the best vacation I'd ever taken. For the next couple of years, everything ran smoothly. Now and then, my thoughts would drift back to that winter, to the brink of calling it all off. But I was always glad I didn't. I chose to let the doubts go and focused on the good in front of me. We kept working on the house, and it became one of the neighborhood's standout properties. I was proud of what we were building, in every sense. Business continued to thrive, and we even explored expanding into new areas. But between the staff and the demand, we were already stretched thin. During that time, I also formed a solid friendship with John Pham. He was both a reliable team member and an all-around decent person. He understood how we operated and knew our machinery inside and out. Most nights, he was the last one to lock up and leave. Every few weeks, John Van Nathan and I would unwind in the shop after hours. The place always smelled like sawdust and cedar. We'd sit there and knock back 6 beers each, just the two of us. Our talks weren't deep. We chatted about work, everyday stuff, life in general. I genuinely enjoyed their company, and I had the sense they felt the same about mine. Right when it seemed like we'd finally hit a stable groove, trouble arrived. A new player from Asia had started shipping products into the U.S., and we caught wind of them first down in Southern California. We knew it was only a matter of time before they'd break into our markets too. Their product was engineered to resemble some of ours, but their pricing undercut us by at least 30%. It wasn't long before we saw the effects. Sales were beginning to dip. For years, we'd been growing steadily, pouring resources into scaling up to meet demand. But for the first time ever, we were shrinking instead of expanding. Ted, Kimberly, and I sat down to regroup. Ted's take was that we needed to hit the road, visit our clients, and explain the value and quality difference between our offerings and the competition. That meant someone would have to cover the Northern California region in addition to the mountain territories. "Cam," Ted said, "I'll need you to take that on." I knew he wasn't wrong, and I didn't argue. But I was worn thin. That night, I sat down with Celia to tell her about what was happening at work and what I'd need to take on in the coming months. "How long is this going to last?" she asked. I told her honestly. I wasn't sure, but it would take a while. Probably months. "Months!" she snapped. "You're telling me you'll be gone half the time for months on end?" I nodded. I couldn't make promises I knew I couldn't keep. She didn't take it well. Suddenly, I was juggling pressure at work with rising tension at home. There were still occasional good days, but over the next half year, things between us got worse. The warmth we used to share became rare. It felt like I was battling on 2 fronts, fighting for business during the week and for peace at home every weekend. 6 months of near-constant travel and her growing frustration brought us to a breaking point. I was doing what I had to do to keep the company afloat. And it was working. The business held together. But the cost was high and the work never slowed down. And she just couldn't or wouldn't see that. I left for the Bay Area on a Monday after a weekend that was cold and distant. We hadn't talked much. There was no affection, no comfort. By the time I got on the plane, I was buried in guilt. On Tuesday, I called her. I told her we needed a night together when I returned. Her voice had a little spark in it. For the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. Friday came. We went to dinner at Tomlinson's Bistro in Old Town. Celia was sweet that night, touching my hand, laughing, asking about my week. We shared a great meal, a bottle of wine, then had a couple of drinks after. As we waited outside for our Uber, I stepped away to use the restroom. When I came back, I saw them, Marcus, Bobby, and their crew, all standing around Celia. She was glowing, smiling wide, laughing freely. Marcus had his arm wrapped around her waist. I walked straight over and grabbed Marcus by the wrist to move his hand away. He flinched like he was about to take a swing at me. I shoved him. Then it happened. I hit the ground hard. Somebody had blindsided me. Cold metal, blunt force. I blacked out just for a second. When I came to, Celia was helping Marcus to his feet. Then she turned to them, and said she was sorry. I was still groggy on my knees, eye swelling fast, but I knew exactly what I was seeing. She finally walked over and started yelling at me. Said I started it, said it was my fault. Eventually, someone from the restaurant came out to check what the commotion was. The others scattered. An Uber pulled up. We both got in. I was still reeling, dazed, furious. She latched onto me like nothing had happened. Why did I escalate it? Why did I go after Marcus? What had I been thinking? She hissed at me. This is my body. Who do you think you are, attacking my friends? I stayed silent. I didn't trust myself to speak. I was shaking with rage, at her, at the situation. All this stress at work and now this? She showed more loyalty to Marcus than to me, her husband. As soon as we got inside the house, she headed for the freezer to get me an ice pack. She had no idea how close I was to losing it. "Get your ass away from me," I snarled. She froze in place, stunned. Just stared at me. "Get the hell out of here! You can stay in the guest house." "What is wrong with you tonight?" she shot back. "Tonight?" I echoed, growing more frustrated. "It's not just tonight. It's every damn night." Every evening it was the same. Her bitterness, her silence, no warmth, no encouragement, just complaints while I kept trying to hold everything together for us. Without another word, she turned, went into the bedroom, gathered a few things, and walked straight out the back door toward the cottage. I needed space anyway. Her leaving gave me a sense of relief I wasn't proud of, but I accepted it. I poured myself a glass of brandy and sat at the table. By the second pour, I was calmer, reflecting. My job was something I took pride in. It wasn't easy, but it was a real career. I loved what I did. My connections meant something to me. Ted was not only a colleague, but also a mentor and friend. Kim and I had a friendship that endured, even after our marriage didn't. And Mike? He was still my closest friend. This house, too, meant a lot. I had slowly turned it into what I envisioned as the ideal place to live. Maybe it mattered so much because my childhood was unstable when it came to housing, never knowing where we'd be next. Owning and shaping this home gave me a kind of grounding I never had before. I started to feel hopeful again. I told myself that Celia and I would have a real conversation tomorrow, maybe even look into counseling. I decided to give her some time alone. At 9 a.m. the next morning, I made up a tray with coffee, juice, and fruit and carried it out to the cottage. When I opened the door, it was empty. Her belongings were gone. The bed hadn't been touched. She hadn't stayed there at all. What now? I walked around the backyard for close to an hour, then tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Odd. I called again later that afternoon. Still nothing. I did some cleaning around the house and kept trying to reach her. Finally, I phoned Kimberly. She invited me over for lunch. It was just the three of us, Kim, her daughter Millie, and me, talking things through. Kim was balanced in her take, pointing out where both Celia and I had gone wrong. Millie, on the other hand, was clearly in my corner. We discussed every possible outcome, even divorce. That week I stayed in town. I called Celia several more times, but she never picked up. By Tuesday, I decided the ball was in her court. Then Friday rolled around. She called in the middle of the afternoon. She said she'd been with friends and needed to stop by and pick up a few things. She arrived around 6 p.m. I tried to open a conversation, but she shut it down, saying she wasn't ready to talk. I asked where she'd been staying. She only said, "At a friend's." I pressed her. "Who?" "Just a friend," she repeated. I told her I'd be leaving again soon for another show, and that when I got back, I wanted us to sit down and really talk. She nodded. "Okay," she said. She drove off in a car I didn't recognize. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see who was behind the wheel. That Sunday night, I caught a flight to Denver so I could hit the ground running Monday morning. I kept offering what my clients valued: dependability, service, real relationships. The competition could undercut me on price, but they couldn't touch us on trust and quality. Eventually, issues started surfacing in the cheaper Asian-made products, defects, inconsistencies. As a result, we retained a surprising amount of our business. Tuesday evening, I had dinner with Junior Longfellow. We were close enough that I felt comfortable telling him everything about Celia, the fight, her leaving. After listening, he said, "You know, we don't actually need you at the expo this weekend. Our company was co-sponsoring a booth with Longfellow's team. It's going to be slow," he said, "and honestly, I already have too many people working it. You should head back home and take care of things." At first, I was inclined to argue, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Friday morning, I caught the earliest flight home. I landed before 9 a.m. The week in Colorado had gone well. I felt hopeful, even though I knew Celia and I had some heavy lifting ahead. I drove straight home from the airport. But the moment I opened the door, I sensed something was off. The place was a wreck. Had someone broken in? I looked around more carefully. It didn't look like a burglary. It looked like a party had happened here. Empty bottles, Trash scattered around, dirty dishes piled high, a scorched patch on the newly refinished hardwood floor, a huge dark stain ruining the couch. I checked every room. No one was inside, but the guest bed had clearly been slept in. Celia? Was it really her? I had believed she loved this house as much as I did. Now I wasn't so sure. I stepped outside. Everything in the backyard seemed untouched, except for a few cigarette ends scattered on the ground. I made my way toward the guest cottage, and the moment I pushed the door open, I saw Celia and Marcus asleep in the bed together. What the hell was this? Celia bolted upright, startled. You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow, she stammered. Marcus, unfazed, rolled over and looked at me with a smug expression. Get the hell out of here, you piece of shit, I shouted. He stretched casually. Relax, man. I'll leave. But remember, she owns half of this place, too. You've got 2 minutes, I snapped, voice rising. Celia glared. We're married. This is my house just as much as yours. Rage boiled in my chest. I knew if I didn't walk away right then, things would spiral out of control. 2 minutes, I repeated and turned my back on them. Back inside the main house, I phoned Mike and gave him the rundown. He remained level-headed and told me he'd contact some divorce lawyers and help set everything in motion. At this point, a divorce felt inevitable. I also called Kim at work and gave her the short version. She told me she and Millie would stop by that evening. I ordered new locks from the hardware store and threw myself into cleaning the damn disaster that had become my home. Mike rang back not long after. He'd set up a Monday meeting at 11 a.m. with a lawyer named Darren King. I looked him up. Military background, Texas-born, dark-haired, strong jaw, and a sharp, almost playful look in his eyes. Fine. My phone rang again. I checked the cottage. Celia and Marcus were gone, but they'd left the place trashed. I changed the locks just as planned. By the time I was done, it was nearly dinner, and Kim and Millie arrived. I told them everything. Even Kim, who had tried to stay neutral in the past, said the relationship was beyond saving. By then, my sorrow had given way to raw anger. Meeting Darren King confirmed my first impression. He was just as he appeared, firm grip, steady gaze. He explained that although Celia had cheated, infidelity wouldn't influence the divorce outcome. He asked about finances. I gave him the rundown, our home, the bank and retirement accounts, and my 9% ownership in specialty timbers. He told me to prepare for an even split, 50-50. He said the paperwork would be ready by the end of the week. When I walked out of his office, it hit me like a brick. The marriage was done. She'd walk away with half the home's value, and half my stake in specialty timbers. The foundation of everything I'd built was cracking. I started feeling the weight of it all. I called Mike again, told him what the attorney had said about splitting everything down the middle. Mike was calm. Don't stress about that just yet, he said. Focus on getting through this. I might be able to help. Something in his voice helped me breathe easier. Still, what could he actually do? The law doesn't bend for hope. I went into the office, not because I was particularly motivated, but because I couldn't bear to sit in that empty house. Work offered a familiar rhythm, a temporary escape. Apparently, both Ted and Kim had already spoken to Mike. They were optimistic, strangely upbeat about the whole thing. I wasn't. Even the warehouse guys, John and Nathan included, had heard the story. John came up to me and said, "We've got your back, boss. You're not alone." Their support meant more than I could say. Friday rolled around, and I had Celia served with the divorce papers at her workplace. Almost immediately, she texted, "Coward. You couldn't even bring them to me in person. I want half of everything." I first got in touch with Mike, who directed me to call Darren. Darren's instructions were clear: sever all contact with her immediately. If she retained legal counsel, I was to inform Darren at once, and everything would be handled between the lawyers. Still, I couldn't shake the anxiety. My mind kept drifting to my home, my ownership in the company, and the niche I'd built. Feeling overwhelmed, I rang Mike again. "I get it, you're stressed," he said, "but I'm already working on a few things behind the scenes. When have I ever let you down?" "You haven't," I admitted, "but can you at least tell me what you're doing?" "Not yet," he replied. "Just trust me." The days blurred into a routine of endless work. I stopped caring about the house altogether. She could have it for all I cared. I felt like I was operating under a permanent gray sky, emotionally and mentally drained. It wasn't just the threat to my financial life. She had vanished, and I had no idea where she was. I kept asking myself how it had all gone wrong. Sure, I worked long hours, but it was all for the life we were building, or so I thought. In my mind, short-term pain was the price of long-term reward. And yes, I always knew she had a playful side. She enjoyed attention, especially from other men. What happened at that nightclub was proof enough. I cycled through sadness, fear, and fury almost hourly. The only upside was that business had bounced back, and we were now eyeing expansion into Southern California, maybe even Texas. We had started getting interest from buyers in those areas. One evening, as I pulled into my driveway, a car with heavily tinted windows rolled up. I caught a glimpse. Celia was in the passenger seat. They idled just long enough to be noticed, then drove off the second I arrived. They clearly knew where I lived. That next Tuesday, Darren called with an update. He'd received legal notice from Celia's attorney. They were demanding half of my stake in Specialty Timbers, 50% of my liquid assets and investments, and full claim to the house. I lost it. There was no way I'd agree to that. Darren told me to breathe. He reminded me that they could ask for anything, but that didn't mean they'd get it. He and Mike were working on something financial and hinted there might be a trick up their sleeve. 2 more weeks crawled by. One night I joined John, Nathan, and Van for drinks in Old Town. We were at the Z Bar catching up when I noticed a couple of guys who worked for Marcus pass by. They gave me a sharp glance and quickly moved along. I glanced at John. He was watching them too. "That his boss?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. The 3 of them slipped into Vietnamese, exchanging a few words. "What are you saying?" I asked. "Don't worry, boss. We've got you," said Van with a nod. The following day, Darren called with news. A preliminary settlement discussion was set for next Wednesday at his office. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Just show up at 3 p.m., he said. I rang Mike right after to fill him in. "Yeah, I know," he said. "We'll be there." "We?" I asked. "Who's we?" "You'll see. Keep the faith." Then he hung up. I didn't know what to make of it. Confused, but cautiously hopeful. That Wednesday I arrived early. Darren's assistant walked me to a quiet back office. Soon after, I was brought into a conference room. On our side, Darren, Mike, someone unfamiliar to me, and myself. Across from us, Celia's lawyer, Rick Blazengame, Celia, looking as polished as ever, and, to my disbelief, Marcus. He sat there grinning smugly. No greetings were exchanged, no pleasantries. Darren opened the floor. "Go ahead, Mr. Blazengame, this is your meeting." Rick cleared his throat. "Mrs. Joseph is simply seeking what is owed to her after being ejected from the marital residence." "Continue," Darren said, eyes fixed on him. Rick handed out a document. "Here is a fair and accurate inventory of the marital assets," he said. A 9% ownership stake in Specialty Timbers LLC, with half assessed at $360,000. B. A 50% interest in a residence located on Ravenscrest Drive, with the shared value marked at $325,000. C. Half of Mr. Joseph's retirement savings, which currently amount to $63,000. D. An equal split of their joint bank accounts totaling $19,000. E. Various personal items and furnishings, each with individual appraisals. Then, unexpectedly, a man I didn't recognize opened his briefcase and withdrew a few documents. "Mr. Blazengame," he said, "let me formally introduce myself to both you and your client. My name is Aaron DeVosier. I'm a practicing attorney with a doctorate in corporate law. I believe these documents may be relevant to your case." He handed a stack of legal papers over to Celia and Blazengame. "I need to clarify something," Aaron continued. "Mr. Joseph is not the legal owner of the property on Ravenscrest Drive. That home is held by Specialty Timbers, LLC. "But he owns the company," Blazengame interjected, clearly unsettled. Aaron cut him off. "No, he does not. According to the company's bylaws, the majority shareholders can appoint or remove an owner under certain conditions, especially if the individual's involvement poses a potential threat to the business. If you review page 3 of the latest annual report, you'll see the majority voted to revoke Mr. Joseph's shares, well before the divorce proceedings even began." At that, Marcus stood up and shouted, "That's absurd! They're still half yours. Celia cried in frustration. Blasingame, energized by the sudden turn, pressed forward. But before anyone could continue, Darren King calmly raised his hand and stated, "Whoever you are, one more outburst, and you'll be asked to leave. If you won't," he added coldly, "I will personally escort you out." Marcus stormed from the room, slamming the door behind him. Celia remained seated, tears falling silently as the room grew tense. Blasingame turned to Darren. "Mr. Devossier has examined all company records and has certified them with the Oregon Attorney General's office. You're welcome to pursue this through the courts, but let me warn you, it will cost your client significantly. Mr. Devossier, by the way, has consulted on far more complex corporate matters than this. And in this instance, as a personal favor to his fraternity brother Michael Robinson, he's working pro bono for Mr. Joseph." I was just as stunned as Celia and Blasingame. Darren then reached into a folder and produced a check. "This is a cashier's check for $25,000. This is our final settlement offer, Mr. Blasingame. Would you like a moment to confer with your client?" "Yes, I think we'll do that," Blasingame replied. We left the room and followed Darren into his office. I hugged Mike, then Darren. When I turned to hug Aaron Devossier, he extended his hand. "A handshake will do just fine," he said with a smirk. I laughed and shook it. "Thank you all. But wait, don't I actually own my house?" Mike reassured me with a smile. "Yes, don't worry. The house is yours. When my dad originally arranged the purchase with Terry Peterson, Peterson refused to sell it to you directly. He didn't think you'd be able to make the payments. So my dad stepped in and handled the payments, and you paid him. Technically, the title ended up in the name of Specialty Timbers." Aaron nodded. "I reviewed the paperwork myself. Once this is all resolved, the title will be transferred to your name," I asked. "What about my 9% in the company? Do I still have it?" "Not exactly," Mike answered. "Right now, no. But when everything settles, you'll actually own 14%. I'm gifting you an additional 5% outright. Honestly, Cam, you've earned it. You've contributed a lot to the company's growth." At that moment, Darren's secretary entered and announced that Blasingame was ready to resume discussions. We returned to the conference room and took our seats. Darren addressed them first. "So, Mr. Blasingame, what have you and your client decided?" Blasingame sighed. "It's more complicated than it seems. True, Mr. Joseph may not hold legal title to the home, but Mrs. Joseph invested a tremendous amount of time and effort improving it. While he was away on business, she was the one maintaining it." "And," Darren prompted, "we feel that she deserves more compensation than this," Blasingame continued. At that, Darren calmly closed the folder, placed it back into his briefcase, and rose to his feet. "Then I'll see you in court." Mike and Aaron stood with him. Wait, Blasingame said almost under his breath. "We'll take the $25,000. Darren retrieved the divorce decree. Celia and I both signed. It was finally over, and I had come out of it without spending a fortune. As Celia and Blasingame exited the room, Mike called out loud enough for everyone to hear, "$25,000? That's a steal." We were ready to go up to $75,000. Celia let out a quiet sob as the door closed behind her, and that was that. "That was a bit brutal, Robbie," Aaron remarked. Mike just shrugged. "Not brutal enough if you ask me." We headed to the bar to celebrate, and this time the drinks were on me. I couldn't have been more thankful for the legal guidance I'd received, and especially for having Mike Robinson in my corner, not just as counsel, but as a true friend. That Friday dragged on, a demanding workday, but a rewarding one. Everything seemed to be falling into place. I was riding a wave of momentum, feeling uplifted by the steady backing I had from Ted, Kim, Mike, John, and the warehouse crew. Being surrounded by solid people like that made me feel like I was part of something meaningful. Still, there was a heaviness I couldn't shake. I was angry with Celia, sure, but underneath the anger was sorrow. The end of that relationship haunted me. A few different choices, maybe a few better moments, and we might have made it. But then again, I kept wondering, should something meant to last really be that delicate? It's a hard question, As I wrapped up for the day and headed home, I had no idea that a dark sedan with tinted windows was tailing me. I didn't think twice about the vehicle behind me. I was simply relieved to return to the quiet of my home. I headed straight for the patio out back, craving a cold beer and a few moments of peace. I sat down, closed my eyes, and let out a long breath, letting the weight of the day drift off. That's when I heard them. 3 men, and one of them, Marcus, was holding a knife. "Well, well, well," he sneered. "Look what we've got here." "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, my voice trembling. Fear had already started creeping in. "I need a piece of you," he said, grinning. "A couple fingers, maybe a hand. Who knows?" Panic set in as I scanned for an exit, but it was too late. The other 2 had me restrained in seconds. "This is going to be fun," Marcus said with an ugly smile. But just then, something broke the tension. A burst of noise from outside the cottage. Seconds later, John, Nathan, Van, and 3 of their friends stormed into the yard. "Need a hand, boss?" John asked, calm and confident. "Yeah," I said, relieved. "Could you help these gentlemen find the exit?" Marcus froze. His 2 goons bolted. John's crew intercepted them, and John himself grabbed Marcus by the arm. "We're going to have ourselves a little talk," he told Marcus coolly, as they led him off the property. About an hour later, John came back alone. I thanked him, deeply shaken, and asked how he'd known something was wrong. "I saw a blacked-out car tailing you when you left work," he explained. "Recognized the guys. Not good people." "I don't even know how to thank you," I said, overwhelmed. "You don't have to," John replied. "You're my friend." That hit me hard. I actually felt my eyes welling up. "And boss," he added, "they won't be coming back. I can promise you that." I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. Epilogue, 5 years later. 5 years down the line, business has had its fair share of challenges, but overall, we've been riding high. We brought in someone new recently, a guy who didn't know logging at first, but he's sharp, eager to learn, and has proven to be a quick study. He now works with John and the rest of the operations crew. His name? Chase DeVosier. Yes, that Chase. Mike's old fraternity brother, Aaron's cousin. The one who helped me out back when everything was falling apart. Chase wasn't sold on the college path and needed a job. I thought hiring him was just returning a favor, but it turns out he's become an indispensable part of the team. Ted still shows up daily, though he spends more time reading the newspaper and catching up with longtime friends than anything else. Kimberly handles the real day-to-day running of things, with me stepping in when needed. I still travel quite a bit, though less than before, now that things have found their rhythm. My personal life's taken a positive turn too. Thanks to John and Nathan, I met Vangeli's sister. Yes, that's her real name. I asked her about it once, and she said her mom, overwhelmed with joy at her birth, blurted out, "It's Jelly!" And the name stuck. Adorably enough, she fits the name. She's beautiful, with a radiant personality, and works as a fitness instructor at the Valley Club. She's in incredible shape. I'm nearly 10 years her senior, but she's never made an issue of it. She also doesn't seem to mind that I'm not in a hurry to walk down the aisle again. She tells me, "If you so much as look at another woman, I'll kick her ass. Then I'll kick yours. All I can do is laugh and love her a little more. As for Celia, no, I never saw her again. Never bumped into her, never heard anything. It's as if she vanished entirely from my world. And honestly, I'm fine with that. Truthfully, she rarely crosses my mind these days. There was one occasion when I spotted Marcus coming down the street toward me. He noticed me, then quickly moved to the other side. I carry a deep sense of gratitude for the people who've shared parts of my life. Ted, Kim, Millie, John, Pham, Nathan, Van, and of course Jelly. But above everyone else, there's Mike. I cherish my home and I'm proud of the work I do. Life is good. I feel genuinely happy.